and welcome to the final show in A Year Gardening 2021. Thanks very much for your company over the year. It has been greatly appreciated, and I thought we'd spend just a little bit of time looking back over the year and what I've achieved in the garden. After this show, I'm going to be taking just a short break until March next year, and then I'll be back with you and fill you in over the wonderful things that have happened during winter, and we'll look forward to spring and summer next year. So for now, I will leave you with A Year Gardening 2021.
Hello and welcome to January in A Year Gardening, and I'm just showing you some pictures of the frost and the coldness outside as we are running through January. However, in this show we're going to show you the planning, the projects and the planting as I promised you I would. The first project we've got is putting up the polytunnel. So let me show you that now.
Well, that's the first levelling of the ground to take the polytunnel. Now, what we have got to do now is get the steel tubular frame and assemble that. The site then start the levelling process before we start securing. So that's my next job.
Well, now the posts are set in the ground, and I've also prepared a trench along each side to take the tails of the polytunnel, as there's an excess of around about half a metre on the bottoms, and that will turn into the ground, and then we'll overfill that with soil, which will also add to the strengthening. So now all that's done, my next job is to go and actually get the plastic and fit that over the top. We're getting there slowly. My seeds ordered and the plans for the planting are all on the computer. I can start preparing the beds. So I've come down to the polytunnel and been doing a little bit of digging in the soil and tidying things up, and what we've got now is the first side of beds prepared. I'll still need to be digging in some fish blood and bone and some general fertiliser to make sure the ground is suitable for the plants. But what I have done is I've measured out and divided up the various beds and put in a small section of timber across the divisions, which will give me the 3 beds on this side. And this is where I'm going to be doing my cabbages and my cauliflowers. So quite looking forward to getting all this going. But for now, I've got to finish the preparations in here, and also one of my raised beds, which is looking a lot worse for wear, get the sides on that rebuilt and get that ready, and that's the one that's going to be taking my potatoes, so I've got a fair bit of work to do on that one. But this is all about being prepared for a successful harvest, so sowing for success, and that's what we're doing now. We're sowing the ground, preparing the ground for our seeds, which will start off in the greenhouse before bringing out here.
While we're talking about sowing for success, just thought I'd show you, these are the garlic that I planted back in, I think it was November, and they're coming through nicely. We've got 10 plants there, which will be more than enough for me for next year.
You'll probably remember these pots from last year, and I had these on the patio with some geraniums and a couple of fuchsias and things growing inside. Well, they've all been cleared out and they're overwintering. The geraniums cuttings have been made, and we've got new plants growing from those as well. And I'm going to be reusing these pots this year to plant in a couple of pencil cypress, and they're going to go on the step at the top of the patio as a feature to lead into the garden. So these plants arrived from Kew Garden about a week ago, and over the last 24 hours I've really soaked the pots in water to make sure that when I transplant the pots they're going to not damage the plants at all. What I've also done is I've made an indentation, I'll just show you, in the top, and that's basically the plant pot I've put inside here, so I know that the plant is going to fit nicely in there comfortably for size. So what I've got here, I've got two of these pencil cypress, but here is one of them, and these will grow at around about a foot 30 centimeters every 12 months. So getting them at around about, this is probably around about 800 millimeters, 900 millimeters, and it's going to be a good size for growing on in the pots. So all I'm going to do is I'm just going to tap these out of there, and as you can see, plenty of root in here. I'll just loosen that up just a little bit, so that's going to roll around and grow out inside there, and bring that nicely down into there. And I'm going to bring the compost in just around the edge of that, and then I'm going to top the compost off, give it a little bit more of a fill. So I'll just bring that up here, and I may well underplant this with some violas or similar flowering plants for the summer. We'll probably get those into some seed trays in the next few weeks. Mid-February is a pretty good time for sowing those when you're under glass or inside on a windowsill. A little bit more of that into there. So that's nice and firm down into the soil. And once again, we're just going to chop that off with a little more water. Make sure the plant is nice and comfortable. One thing I do have to watch with these is obviously I'm going to be moving those up the garden, and I don't want them to be too heavy when I move them. So when I move them outside, probably April time, I will leave them a few days without watering them too much, so they're light enough to move. Plenty of water on here, because being a type of conifer, these really do like a good drink, and they will take up the moisture fairly quickly. So that's planted into there, and I've just got one more to do, and so I'll get that one planted in a second. My peas are growing lovely. My cabbage seedlings are coming along well, and that is now nicely on here, ready to take my compost and some more herbs. Then all I've got to do is put some drainage into the pot here, and that is going to fit nicely in the middle and create our little herb garden area. Very pleased with that. Well, those of you that watched the video where I showed the preparations for the back garden, I've just been edging out the shape for the central border, and all of that grass in there is coming out, and that's going to allow me to plant a lot of perennials, some flowering shrubs and some winter flowering shrubs as well, so we'll get some all year round interest from here. Now I must say that the Amelanchier is looking absolutely superb here, and will soon be in full flower, and I can't wait for that. But this border will be one of the best assets that the garden has got, and then we'll just be having grass paths around. So all I've got to do is dig out all that turf now. Happy days. So that's the new border. The turf is dug out, and there's a little bit of a mound added for height because the garden has no variation in height. But if I just come down here
and then give you a little view there. You'll be able to see that the mound is there. And what we're going to be doing now is we're going to be taking a trip to the garden centre to buy the shrubs to go into this border. Now this ground has already been treated with some fish blood and bone, and also a compost mulch over the top. It's going to take a little bit of work, and I've got to get this nice and soft inside, well dug, so that the plant has a really good chance of growing. And I'll just get dug into here, make this all broken up underneath. And what I tend to do is I just tend to place the plant in its pot in the ground, so I know that I've got the right size hole. I can then just pop that out of here and just tease off some of these roots here. Just loosen them out a little bit where they're growing rather tightly in the pot here, and that will encourage them to spread out into the ground. We'll take a little bit of this compost and just put into the bottom there, and then we'll just work that back in nicely. And there's the first plant in. So we're going to thoroughly enjoy the closeness that this is going to give us, because we are planting them fairly close together, and in keeping them nice and close they will blend and give us a nice hedgy type feel to this little mound. I'm really looking forward to seeing these plants when they're fully established. Probably take a few years for them to bulk out a little bit, because some of these are really young plants and then some of them are more established plants. And again, we just need to tease open some of this root on here. Don't want to cause too much damage to it. And pop that into here. And we're going back in with the soil around here. And as I was explaining earlier, with the compost and fertilisers, we're then going to be covering this with around about 1.5 to 2 inches of compost for a mulch. Get rid of that piece of grass out of there, lovely. Just to retain some moisture in the ground. And once we've got all of these planted, we're then going to give them a very good water. Well, what I'm now going to do is I'm just going to make myself a small area at the top here in front of this ornament, where I'm going to be putting a few bulbs. And I'm going to clear the area out, pop a little bit of compost in there so that there's a good area for these bulbs to grow in. because this ground has been made with the old turfs and soil and things that came out from when this was grass underneath here. I'm sure you remember a couple of months ago when I was just starting this. And so we'll clear that a bit of a clean through there. Go and get some compost in there and plant a few bulbs. Well, hasn't the weather been strange over the last month or so? April, we had all of those frosts. Now we're into May and we've got loads and loads of rain coming through. Nice sunshine in between, but a lot of rain as well. So I've come down into the polytunnel just to check on a few bits and pieces. And what I have got in here growing now, obviously, I've got some new plants. And in here, I have some lovely osteospermum plants, and these are little babies. These are going to go out into the border in a week or so's time. Beautiful mix of colours of daisies, and they're going to be absolutely fantastic. I've also been bringing on some strawberries in here because the garden is about a month behind really where it should be because of that cold April. And things that I would expect to have been in full flower now, like our honeysuckle and our early clematis, are still just in bud. So the garden's a little bit late coming through this year. But my first potatoes, they're coming through the ground nicely, and I've actually got some small peas now on my first crop of peas. So things are moving on as the ground warms up. Where I put my beans in, I'm afraid I've had a little bit of bird damage on a couple of those, so I'm going to just plant some more beans around those in the ground so we'll get another lot growing through. Well, with my strawberries in here, I've got some old garden pots and containers which we don't use in the garden anymore, and things like the hanging baskets. I've got one here, and these are where I'm growing my strawberries inside at the moment. So all in all, even though the weather's not that clement outside, we can still do a bit of gardening. Well, just before I leave the polytunnel, I'd like to just show you also something else we've been growing in here, which is some lupins for the garden as well. And they're coming on nicely, and these won't be that long now until they're ready to go out into the garden. Absolutely beautiful summer plant, and I'm so looking forward to the beauty they're going to bring to the garden this year. Well, here we are at the mound, the new border, and we've planted out some of our perennials, and we're starting to get some nice colour coming in here. So everything is really taking shape rather well in this border as well. Well, just over 12 months ago, all we had here was a square of weedy grass and a concrete strip running along in front of the house. So the redesign was, with a little bit of a nod to the formal gardens, to take the grass into a circle, and using a little inspiration from an old toy that I used to have, which was a memory game. It was a circle with 4 little coloured chevrons inside, which you had to remember and press them in order. We've got 4 little beds running around here, which I put wildflower seeds into last year, and they've reseeded and come through. Another area of the garden that I planted up is this perennial border here. You can't see at the moment, but over the back we've got a couple of Perennial Border, and they're going to grow through and form a nice backdrop to this lovely perennial border. Again, we've got things like cornflowers which are coming through in here, and then we've got echinopsis over the back. So this is really taking shape, and this is only now in its first year, so looking really, really lovely. Well, I've been working on this border, and we've got a nice edge coming along here. A little bit more work to do on there. Taken out a lot of the weeds from behind, and the phlox is now appearing, and I'll just put this little baby cordyline in here, which is going to grow maybe as big as that one, but it's going to grow behind, so maybe 8 or 9 years behind. So this will be lower and that'll be higher, with the buddleia growing over here. And we've got the potentilla and the forsythia and the lovely fuchsias coming through. This is really building into a nice border, but I've got to spend some more time just on keeping it clean and tidy. My fault, I've left it alone this year, but now I've started work on here, I'm going to really enjoy making this a really nice part of the garden. So we've got our flag irises that come through every year, but now from one plant I've divided that. I've got 4 plants now, so we should get better growth next year. Loads of aqualesia, and over the back here we have got just a wall of colour, shapes. Still some more aqualesias to cut down. I've got the Procosmia coming over this side here, and they're really coming through beautifully. And then of course underneath all of this lot we have got the hellebores, which will give us that early welcome to spring. So this is a nice bit of the garden and I'm thoroughly enjoying working on it, and I do apologise again for not working on it. On the position of our plants, we can then start to put them in the ground. So I'll just lift this out of the way here and this plant over here, and we'll get a nice area dug here. This soil is actually quite reasonable. The depth of the topsoil is probably around about 7 or 8 inches. But then we do run into some rather nasty clay stuff further down. So we'll get this really dug in there nice and deep. I'm going to open this into a sort of a small trench so I can put the hebe in at the same time as the geranium. Now we're down to the clay, so we'll make a nice break up of that soil down below, which will give the roots a chance to spread well into this. There we are. So first thing we're going to do, a root of something which we don't want. There we go. We'll take the geranium, get this nicely bedded into the ground, and we'll bring the soil in. Right, and I'm going to put that in fairly firmly around the plant. This is going to give it a good chance of taking in here. And then we just take some soil out of here. And we're going to do the same thing now with the hebe in next door. Need a little bit more underneath there. That's lovely. Pop that inside here. And then the edge of the border is starting to take shape along here. I'll plant this one in here, and then the next hebe, and I've got the other geranium to put in at the top. So I better crack on with that. Well, the problem we've had here is the self-seeding plants have actually taken over the border, and this is really making these poor little beasties here, my lovely roses, struggle to live. So these are all coming out. We're giving it a good clear through. I will leave some of the forget-me-nots and a little bit of geranium down the front edge here, and the nasturtiums, the seeds will be in the ground, they will come back. But a lot of the naturally seeded things, which some people call weeds, but I think they're quite nice flowers at times, they've all got to come out. We've got to give this a good clean. The geraniums, as you have seen, are being lifted and they're going to be added to the woodland border, and this will enable me then to plant some natural plants that are not going to overwhelm the roses. So I've got a fair bit of work to do here before the autumn and winter really sets in order to get the ground mulched up and nice and ready for next spring. Well, the wind has already caused a little bit of damage low down here, and if I just cut this back on the bottom here, I can show you how that has been broken off by the wind, and we don't really want any more damage to be caused to the plant. Now I'll be pruning this back properly in the spring of next year, but what I want to do is I want to reduce the risk of damage, so I'm just going to take it down by roughly a third. Just cut it down, which will remove a lot of the dead flowers, and just by taking a third out of the plant, it's going to reduce the chance of the wind giving it any more damage. It's so important when you're doing this to make sure that your secateurs are nice and sharp, then we're not going to cause any damage to the wood, which could let any disease into the plant. So just carry on taking this down. As I say, when it comes to next spring, we'll really cut this down considerably. Whilst I'm doing this, we just take the areas that have got any of the flowers still on there, and we'll remove those, and it'll give the better form and shape to the plant over the course of the winter. A couple here, and already we've got an improvement, and the wind is not going to cause any damage to that plant. Well, you may remember this border that I started last month, and what I'm looking at doing now is putting in some colour for late spring, early summer. And what I've got here are some allium bulbs. These are Allium Drumstick, and they will grow 60, maybe 70 centimetres high. Beautiful single flower on the top, and these are a dark red burgundy sort of colour, and I'm quite looking forward to see how they come out. And I'm just going to mix those into this border. And so the way I plant these, this is quite a nice loose soil on here, so I'm just going to make myself a little trench around the side through here, and I'm going to put these into drifts so that they run through. We'll have a couple of trenches through here, just nice and simple, and they don't need to be too deep, about 1.5 inches, just so that the bulb is a couple of times its own depth into the ground. We'll start with these 2 little drifts here, and then I just put them in around about 3 inches apart, and they will, once we get the more drifts in place, they'll start to take a nondescript shape. Although they're in lines, they're curved lines, and they will not look like lines once they are growing through. And I've probably got around about 70 of these bulbs to put in here. Try and make sure that I put them in the right way up. And once I've got them in the ground, I just gently cover them over with the loose soil. That's a little bit hard there, so we'll just break that down. Just cover that over. Lovely. And then we'll move on to the next area. So what I do is I just transfer myself around, and we can clear out a little bit of the ground here. We might make a slightly different pattern in here. Just pop them round into a sort of circle maybe, with a couple in the middle. Lovely. These will give us a nice amount of a different colour to come through. So we'll just cover these ones in as well. And I'm going to carry on building a drift around the back of this here. Might put a few in at the front as well, but they're a nice tall flower. I've got to keep areas clear along the back because that's where I'm going to be planting the grapevines in spring. So a lot to do, but I'm thoroughly enjoying it. And this border is really taking a nice shape now. And I'm so looking forward to next summer being able to sit out here in amongst the flowers.
Well, there we are, the end of 2021. So we've done a lot, from the putting up of the polytunnel in January to building this new border, finishing at the start of November. So I'd like to just say a quick word to Gareth, who really would like to hear a little bit more of the new theme music. At the end, a little treat for you. It won't be all of it, but it'll be a lot of it. So please enjoy. That just leaves me now to say my goodbyes for the year, and I'll be back in March. So stay safe, be kind to each other, happy gardening, and at this time of year, may I say, a Merry Christmas and a happy, peaceful and prosperous New Year to you all. I'll leave you with a small glass of Doom Bar. Cheers.